What do you think about that? I mean, is it
Um,
absurd or is it expected?
no, no. Well, first of all, I'm still a fan of Southwest. They're a profitable airline. They set a
Hmm.
model they talked about a lot in Blue Ocean Strategies, the book. And, no charge bags. They're not nickel and diming you. And so I'm a big fan. No charge change fees and all that. That that melted down. Of course, I have no insights on that, except that I frequently think when I'm flying how complex it must be to try to route all those people and get the pilots and the crews and the airplanes at the same place at the same time. And if there's a shift, it's like a software that would program a soccer tournament with 100 teams, right? I always
You mean
thought there ought to
like
be
10,000 teams?
10, well, I mean, just a city software, you
Yeah.
know, and who wins what, and they can't do it on that day. They play the same day, and I'm sure there's softwares that do that. But I'm more staggered that they can run an airline than that it messes up. And
Yeah.
evidently they had it's an interesting thought. I don't know how it affects a lot of our listeners, but I do have clients that are this way. There are really two ways to look at business and business operations. One is from a financial standpoint, people who are concerned with EBITDA and ratios and all about how things look for the valuation of the company. And private equity firms do this. I have one company that's interfacing with one, and it's driven financially. The other way is operations, like how do I take care of things and spend less money on expense and make more profit? And the two are related, but they're different. And the reason I brought that up, or it came to mind, was as I read about Southwest, Herb Kelleher, the founder, was an operations guy. He knew the pilots, he knew the crews, he knew the people, he knew what it took, and he was concentrated on operations. The CEO between the current one and maybe two CEOs were financial guys. They're reading spreadsheets and looking at ratios. And I'm all about ratios and spreadsheets, but not to the exclusion of operations. And they neglected the operations. And the way they neglected it, to my understanding, is that they failed to update their software.
Software
And when it
infrastructure.
was, yeah, and when it hit the limit, it exploded. And I think they canceled 13,000 flights. And they had people, I mean, it came down to things like you got a crew ready to go in Los Angeles and nobody knows it.
Yeah.
So the captain has to call somebody. And who's that guy? And how does he put that in the system? So anyway, that was an interesting highlight of the difference between financial thinking and operational thinking. And really, really, really genius, successful business people managed to meld those two. I gave a talk on this the other night to a group, and they're very sensitive to the culture and not all about the numbers and all that. And it's a fine line to walk between culture and productivity, finance. But the way I expressed it to them, I said, hey, it is not all about the numbers, but it is also about the numbers. Because whatever it is you do in your business, however you serve the world, you can't do that if you don't make money, right?
Yeah.
And
No, it's totally true. Did you get to talk to Nick about the Southwest situation? What were his thoughts? Because
yeah,
that's kind of
for
what
3 days while I'm sitting there with him.
that's basically what he consults on and does sales for, right?
Yeah, he is a technical sales consultant for a company called Quest, and we're going to have the CEO on in the next 2 months. They're out in California, pretty sizable organization. And when people ask me what Nick does, I say he does technology. And it's, well, what's that, Is that a gas stove, which is an improvement over a wood-burning stove, or what is it? Well, it's everything. I mean, it can be security and firewalls and things like that. It could be somebody who needs to develop an app to run their business or some aspect of their business. It can be people who were ransomware, and they have a business on Monday and they're completely gone on Friday. It could be some large organization, say a big insurance company is changing out their computer system and their software, and it needs to be up what they call 5 nines, 99.999, which is an ideal. There's no such thing. But it needs to be up on Monday morning on some future date. So whatever. And I think Southwest, I don't know that Nick has talked to Southwest.
Obviously.
That might be Quest has 300 or so people available to deploy, but and they would do it. If Southwest called them, they go, sure, let's go.
Yeah, we'll be here for a few years.
Right.
Yeah. It would just be interesting to hear from his perspective. I think for, the small business owners that we talk to fairly frequently, it's not really comparable, but I think that if there's any lesson from it, one, if you are not using a system like that, if it's all in your head, you're going to crash. If you're just relying on people to call you, kind of like Southwest was, where, okay, yeah, call me, they're going to this spot. You're not able to track and measure what your team's doing and where they're at and how your projects are going using software. You need to get on something like that, because the equivalent for the small business owner is they're sick, or they go on vacation, or they, can't show up for a while because someone else in their family has an issue. Well, effectively, your system crashed because you're not there.
That's a great point that you bring up, because I was talking about it yesterday and thinking about it today. Is one of our listeners' goals for the year, whether you're listening to do this really early or even late in the year, ought to be that if you leave town for 2 weeks and you come back, you will not have just postponed your work, right? You still have to do it. You're just doing it 2 weeks later. You will have had systems and processes in place so the work gets done in your absence. And that's a big deal. Matter of fact, I'm suffering a little of that right now, being gone 3 days longer than I thought. Come back and I have a lot of things sitting here that individually aren't that big a deal, but when taken as a whole, I'm going to be here all weekend. And that's not being very congruent for a coach who preaches that, but that's the fact. And the thing I like about software, Khalil, and this is where you come in, is the way to defeat or the way to delegate properly is to have systems and processes and people who can run them.
Yeah.
Software is systems. I mean, it's what it is. We talk about writing them down, and I usually think English language, or maybe Spanish for Sergio. But I think about writing them down. Software is systems. And for a guy like me, and this is where I need a guy like you, I long ago decided I'm not going to try to keep up with the softwares. It's not my strength. There are so many. I love it if I can go to a client and be the guy, but I need somebody like you who can choose and implement and pick the best one.
Well, and I think there's danger in that kind of thinking that the software is the system. I mean, yes, there are softwares out there that are so specific to your industry, to your trade, whatever it is, that will be, in fact, a system for you. But really, I think it's more so that it forces you to create the system, and it serves as almost a template for the system. You've still got to fill it in, but it's a huge advantage to have the software to kind of be a guiding post for, okay, this is how we're going to run our systems for our business. So don't just think that, the danger is they buy the software and they think, okay, now we're systemized. Like, no, that's not how it works.
No. I don't
definitely takes
mean that
some work
at all.
Yeah.
I mean, people don't usually think of it that way, but QuickBooks, of course, is an entire system. It's a bookkeeping system. You don't have to invent it. But when you have it, it's there. I have a prospective client who's been around a long time, and I send out a questionnaire when I work with people. I ask them, how do you keep books? And the answer I got was Excel.
Yeah. Yeah, it's real, and it's not just with books. I mean, you have clients that you talk to that are still on a server and having to pay, thousands of dollars a month for maintenance and, worried about the server crashing and losing work and stuff like that. If you're not on the cloud right now, you're wasting money, you're wasting time and energy, and you're missing out on a lot of efficiencies that you could be having. And it's really not that hard. It's way easier to get on the cloud than it is to have a server. So That's another thing going back to Southwest that you can kind of take away from it is they were outdated. You know, they're still using a system from the 90s. It's not that you have to be a unit running the most, up to date, most new, flashy thing that's out there technology wise, but you need to be with the times. You don't need to be running a system that's 20, 30 years out of date. You're missing out on too much.